Hi, good evening in Mexico and good morning in Japan. This is what technology allows us to be all live and having a great conference for us. On behalf of Tecnológico de Monterrey and the Vice-Rectory of Innovation and Online Programs, we welcome you to the Learning from Japanese Management Conference, which is part of the activities to promote the internationalization of our programs. Following the international academic trips that we organize, we are pleased to grow a stronger relationship with Globis University, the largest business school in Japan. To deliver this conference, we are privileged to have the distinguished participation of Professor Tomoya Nakamura, who is Dean of MBA from the Graduate School of Management at Globis University. To our participants, I kindly remind you that in order to be able to ask questions, you must log in to the chat on the right side of the screen. Please be in touch with us. Now, I would like to introduce our guest speaker through a video we have prepared for today.
Mr. Tomoya Nakamura is in charge of the English MBA programs at Globis University. He teaches subjects in the leadership and globalization arenas. Mr. Nakamura conducted various global training programs for corporate clients. He periodically writes a column, Key and Management, periodically at Globis Insight. Prior to Globis, he started his professional career at Marubeni Corporation, reorganized an invested company at Advantage Partners, and was the senior managing director of Sun Life Corporation, JASDAQ. At Sun Life, he organized a progressive ESOP for more than 250 employees, including part-time workers. Mr. Nakamura graduated from Hitotsubashi University with a degree in social studies and received his MBA from Harvard Business School. As a research associate of the General Management Unit of Harvard Business School, Mr. Nakamura wrote 2 HBS cases that apply Eastern philosophy to management. Dean, Graduate School of Management, Globis University. Executive Trustee, Educational Corporation of Globis University.
Thank you. Please send your questions and comments to the chat window on your screen. Remember, you need to log in. We will be receiving your questions, and at the end of the session, we will have a question and answer session. Without further ado, please welcome our speaker and friend, Tomoya Nakamura-san, who joins us now from Nagoya, Japan. Hello, Dean Nakamura-san. The audience is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. Good evening. Thank you for joining from Mexico and other parts of the world. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We are very honored to have welcomed Tecnológico de Monterrey students to Globis for the past few years. And I'm delighted to have a chance to speak about Japanese management to you. Next slide, please. I believe there are many best practices in the management world. There are great companies from US, there are great companies from Mexico. For example, we study about CMEX, and in Europe, as well as in Asia. But I believe Japanese management practices are among the best in the management world. Let me share with you some essence of Japanese management. Next, please. The modernization of Japan started in the 1860s. As Japan was a developing nation at that time, we imported technology and system from the Europe, mostly UK, Germany, and France. As capital and human resources were limited at that time, Japanese companies started to form corporate groups called zaibatsu. You might have heard of Mitsubishi Group, Mitsui Group, Sumitomo Group, and others. Japan was defeated in World War II, but the industry took off with the demand from US troops needing supply in the Korean War. Next, please. This is a typical form of a corporate group in Japan. That's on the left side. And I would say maybe in US and UK, companies are more in the right form. This corporate structure will depend on the maturity of financial markets and the labor market. So in Japan, Asia, maybe including Mexico, Latin America, I imagine that there are corporate groups, companies that are in the left-hand structure. Next, please. And because capital was scarce, corporate groups had cross-sharing of equity. And also, they had a main bank, especially in Japan, that provided debt, loans to the group companies. Mitsubishi Bank was the main bank for Mitsubishi Group. We have companies like Mitsubishi Corporation, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, Mitsubishi Motors. And Sumitomo Bank was the main bank for Sumitomo Group, Sumitomo Corporation, Sumitomo Forestry, Sumitomo Realty and Development, and others. As a consequence, Japanese companies tend to have high debt and low return on equity until the 1990s. Next, please. I'd like to introduce some of the study from Dr. Abegren, who is an American business theorist, a founder of Boston Consulting Group Japan. He was a professor at Sophia as well as Globis University. He stated that Japanese kaisha, the Japanese corporation, have the three following characteristics. Career-long employment. Typically, Japanese employees will join a company, stay there for life. Seniority pay, typically pay was in line with age. So the more experience you gain, the higher the pay. And another characteristic is enterprise union. This is a union that is formed for one company. In the United States, we typically see an industry union. So this is a very big difference between maybe US unions and Japan unions. Next, please. And I'd like to mention 3 points about a Japanese business culture. We have a very strong orientation on team spirit. And I think this can be deprived to the agriculture or farming community that we had in the past. The second thing is orientation toward long-term perspective and sustainability, because rice farming has been the major maybe industry for a long time. We live with nature, and we think about suppliers and dealers or distributors, not only about our company, but our partners in the value chain. A third characteristic is a leader takes more responsibility than the functional requirement. In Japan, the corporation was thought to be like a family. So if you are a general manager, you become a father of many of your subordinates. We kind of look at our subordinates as our sons or our daughters. So not only you would pay wages for them, but you try to help them develop their careers. Next, please. This is how a company is seen. So according to Dr. Abegren's study, a company exists, for the employees. So it's like a community. And the community is closely linked with the customers as well as society. But after 1990, a lot of, international investors came in to invest in Japanese company. So we're taking more of a shareholder's perspective. These are maybe the 4 key stakeholders in Japan. Next, please. I'd like to introduce a Japanese company called Ina Food Industry. if you follow Toyota Motor, the president, Mr. Akio Toyota, is a big fan of Inafood, Mr. Tsukakoshi. And what Mr. Tsukakoshi says is they are thinking of annual growth ring management. This is like every year the tree trunk would grow. He believes that the same way the company should grow. So the company should grow to enhance the happiness of customers, happiness of suppliers, happiness of community, and happiness of employees. This is one of the most respected companies in Japan. Next, please. We have seen 3 periods of economic growth in Japan. After the Korean War broke out till the 1979, Japan's economic growth was maybe double digit on average, a very fast growth. From 1979 to 1990, single digit growth. And from 1990 onwards, we have a rather flat economy. Of course, the industry portfolio is changing, but basically our economy overall is kind of stable. Next, please. Now, having said about Japanese company being a community, I receive many questions. Is there competition? And I'd like to say yes. The reason why we were able to grow is because although we see the corporation something like a community, there is competition for director's role, further on to the president role. And typically, the best and brightest among the age group will be chosen to be general manager first, director first, and maybe to the president. If you work in a Japanese companies, it is important to show your capability when you are in number 2 or number 3 positions. This is maybe a little bit different from working in a US company or European company. When I say number 2 or number 3, I'm talking about, let's say, assistant manager or being a senior associate. I would say a manager is, let's say, a number 1 person in the function. Number 2 person is assistant manager, and number 3 person is maybe senior associate. While you are number 2 or number 3, you are asked to act as your manager. You do a lot of coordination, you do a lot of communication with your team member, subordinate, and by being able to do that job, you show to your manager, I qualify to be a manager. So although everything will not be explicitly said, being in a number 2 position or number 3 position means a lot if you work in a Japanese company. Next, please. I would like to talk about task assignments in this chart. This is a study from Dr. Ishida. I'd like to first explain about the right diagram. In the West, job descriptions are very clearly written. So everyone knows where the job lies. And so if he or she is out for vacation, that task is kind of stopped. Now, if we go to the left diagram, this is the job description in Japan. So you only have a very small job description, and there's lots of area in black. The area in black means that the number 2 person, number 3 person will cover a lot of the black areas, which is not clearly written. So in Japan, because we act as a team, everyone sees what your neighbor is doing, and we try to perform very similar to the right rectangle block with a very small job description. Next, please. The globalization of Japanese companies started in the 1980s. I'd like to talk about automotive and consumer electrics in this chart. But initially, Japanese companies, maybe Sony, Panasonic, Toyota, Nissan, we started to export to US from Japan. But there was trade friction because Japanese products were very popular in US and Europe. And Japanese manufacturers were asked to move their plants to Europe and United States. And eventually, maybe 1990s or in the 2000 era, because of cost difference between US, Europe, and Asia, more manufacturing plants are now moved into China and Southeast Asia. And from the 2000 era, following manufacturing, we are seeing more service industries, including banking, finance, to start to globalize. And today we see service companies such as Kumon or Secom, or maybe you have had a ramen noodles, Ippudo. These are some of the food companies that is going global today. Next, please. And however, not all industries are successful. And Japanese consumer electric industry, once known for cutting edge technology and quality, is losing ground to companies like Apple, Samsung, and LG, resulting in large restructuring. As a consequence, some of the Japanese former consumer electronic companies are moving into Hitachi, moving more into business, B2B business, not consumer electronic business. Notably, companies like Hitachi, Mitsubishi Electric, and Toshiba. I'd like to mention about another industry, a Japanese steel industry, once known for high quality steel and very good customer service, now is lagging behind global competitors. For example, ArcelorMittal, they have grown rapidly through M&As, and Chinese rivals have had very high growth with strong demand from the domestic side. Hebei Iron and Steel, Baoshan Iron and Steel are these examples. Next, please. And I'd like to talk about the reason why some of our companies are struggling. In the end, I will talk about good examples. But one thing is digitalization that is taking place. This is a VTR made by analog technologies in the 1970s. So a lot of parts are being interrelated and integrated back then. Next, please. But what we see right now is a microprocessing unit controlling the electronic parts. As a consequence, the technology is very easy to transfer, and the competitors can catch up very easily. So this is one of the reasons why Japanese electronic industry is having difficulties. Next, please. I'd like to also talk about deconstruction. And this is a notion that is brought up, especially in the 2000 era. Back in the 80s, Japanese electronic companies had R&D, manufacturing, sales, service within the group. For example, companies like Sony or Panasonic, they had all function within the company. However, as digitalization occurred, many of the, function could be substituted outside. And right now we are seeing companies like Foxconn that creates maybe TV as an OEM producers for many brands. So we're seeing a lot of, function performed on the market. And as a consequence, we are seeing some new type of companies, for example, a layer master that concentrates only on one function, orchestrator who does maybe two functions but outsources three functions, a market maker where they're making a match between the supply side and demand side, and we have a personal agent who acts like an agent for a typical customer. One of the example of layer master could be companies like Microsoft or Intel. They are very good in software or microchip. An example of orchestrator may be a computer company like Dell. They're very good at marketing. They're very good at R&D, but they don't necessarily make all the products in-house. A market maker would be something like eBay. There are customers who would like to sell, let's say, a reused product, and there are customers who would like to buy. A personal agent may be a company like Amazon. They look at the customer, and by looking at the customer, they would make proposal from past buying experiences. Next, please. Now, I'd like to talk about three successful Japanese companies in globalization. These are Toyota Motor Corporation, Omron, and Oryx. I hope you have been familiar with these companies. Toyota is the largest automotive company in the world. In fiscal year 2014, they had sales of 227 billion and profit of 18 billion US dollars. They are known for unique production system called Toyota Production System, which is composed from just-in-time manufacturing, a Kanban system, continuous improvement called Kaizen, and belief in people. Another company that I brought up is Omron. This is a high-tech company that creates parts for sensing and controlling, automation. And in fiscal year 2014, they have achieved sales of US dollar 7.1 billion with profits of 517 million. They are known for unique small business unit structure and coordination between business division and headquarter function. The third company that I'd like to bring up today is Oryx. This is the largest leasing company in Japan. Fiscal year 2014, they had 18 billion US dollars sales and profits of 1.9 billion US dollars. They are known to have two HR systems, one for traditional financial services and the other for new financial services. Next, please. When we think about a company, we tend to look at we tend to look at the very right. For example, we tend to look at profits. We tend to look at the stock price of the company. If we don't look the far right, then we look at the second box from on the right. We look at market performance. How is the brand? What's the market share? What's the perceived quality? But in looking at the strength of the company, we need to look at the left side, which is kind of shaded. One is productive performance, so things like productivity, lead time, and the other is organizational capability. What can a company do? And I like to say that the three of the companies are very good in the left part of the chart. Next, please. Okay. This is what is done at Toyota. And let me start maybe from internalization, the box at the left bottom. A young member who joins a team is taught by, let's say, a manager. They both are in the shop floor creating automotive. And there is a learning by doing thing, and through doing, he or she captures the tacit knowledge that the manager has. And this tacit knowledge, I'm going from the left bottom to the left top. This knowledge is kind of shared among his or her peers. So we see the two I intersect in socialization. Then each individual in the team would share his or her knowledge and share it within the entire group. And through this process, they would try to externalize the knowledge of how to create a particular part. For example, door, how do we attach a door into an automobile body? And this is only for the door division, but there are function teams that creates the, the body. There are teams that creates the chassis, which is like the bone, basic infrastructure of the car. And by combining the team's explicit knowledge, we believe that new knowledge is born. So yes, Toyota is known for, just in time, low inventory, very good management, but basically they are very good in creating new type of knowledge. And when we say new type of knowledge, it's not just explicit knowledge that can be written down in documents, but it's a very tacit knowledge that can only be passed down by doing. So this is one of the reasons why many automotive companies are studying Toyota, but they cannot really capture the essence. Next, please. Now, I'd like to talk about Oryx. If you can see the diagram, the yellow part of Oryx is traditional leasing. So it's about office equipment leasing, it's about auto leasing, and it's about a rental car. In this business, the salespeople who join Oryx is grown up in a traditional Japanese environment. That means seniority pay and you promote maybe according to age. However, Oryx have expanded their domain, not only from leasing, but into new fields, non-bank finance. This is like real estate and venture capital. And also they have started investment banking. The orange part that says boutique. For Oryx to run these new businesses, they had to learn a lot from US and Europe. So they kind of hired mid-level employees who used to work maybe in Western companies. So this orange part is run by kind of Western management. And by combining the two, they are trying to expand from traditional leasing to a new area of finance. So it's a Japanese type of management mixed with a Western type of management. And right now, Oryx is moving more towards performance-based pay. So this is like a new type of company, a hybrid between Western management and Japanese management. Thank you. Next, please. Now, I'd like to talk about Omron. You might have seen Omron thermometers or maybe scale meters that they sell. But Omron creates a lot of electronic parts for factories or for screens. And they are known to be a technology leader in the company. So the small blue circles that you see represents one business unit. And it's very rare in Japan, but typically these small units are run by managers who are in the 30s. So at Omron, we have lots of young managers who are running the business units. But when we think of business, for example, procurement or technology alliance, it's very difficult for a small unit to have alliance maybe with Philips or with General Electric. So what they do is they negotiate as a company. So although one business unit is small, sometimes they come together as one group and they do some negotiation. So Omron is trying to go global, utilizing entrepreneurship, very small business unit, freedom or quick speed, along with an integrated force, especially for procurement or strategic alliance. Next, please. So I have talked about traditional Japanese companies, and traditional Japanese companies were a social system that's been very, that is inherited from agriculture. But at the same time, there were competition within the age group, and typically managers looked at their subordinates as sons or daughters, and the managers took the responsibility to develop the next generation of people. So Japanese companies were an economic driver, but at the same time, a social system. We talked about companies that are having, or industries that are having difficulty in globalization. We talked about consumer electronic companies. We talked about steel companies. But some of the successful Japanese companies, they've been doing very well because of its uniqueness. We talked about Toyota. Toyota developing their people through the knowledge creating system. We talked about Oryx, a large leasing company, trying to create a hybrid management system between Japanese type organization and Western type organization. And we looked at Omron, bringing together small organization entrepreneurship into a corporate structure. So, successful Japanese companies are doing very unique things that combine maintaining a social system but pursuing economic efficiency. It was a small lecture and maybe I rushed too much in the beginning, but I hope that Japanese management can bring examples for Mexican corporations to find a suitable balance between economic development and a stable society foundation. Sorry, I may have rushed too much, but I'll be happy to take your questions. And in the questions, I might go back a little bit of a slide and do a further explanation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nakamura, for this informative and interesting presentation. Our audience is very pleased, and we have received some questions. Let's start with the first one. What do you think are the main advantages of the Japanese management to have had such big growth? What would you think are the, how can I say, like the main characteristics specifically that had the Japanese culture and the Japanese management grow so fast?
Thank you. First of all, I think we were fortunate that there was strong demand in Japan after World War II. The demographic were very favorable for Japan. We had a growing population, and they had a growing income. So that's one point. The second point I'd like to mention is the educational system of Japan. I think was very well suited for manufacturing. And as a consequence, when consumer wanted more products, we had many industries to provide them. The third point I would like to say is because the free trade, or how to say, export and import with the United States, with Europe, with Asia, was quite favorable at that time. Of course, when there were friction, Japanese companies moved into United States or Europe to create jobs there. But I think these three things combined led to the high economic growth till from post-war to 1970s.
Thank you very much. We have another question. How are some ways in which Western and Eastern companies may work together? Can you give us a recommendation or some recommendations?
It's very, easy to say Western companies are very shareholder oriented, so they care about quarterly financial performance. And in the past, maybe until 1990s, a Japanese company typically had a long-term view. But if you look at good companies today, it's very difficult to say this is a typical American company or this is a typical, let's say, like a Japanese company. For example, some of the things that American company like 3M is doing is they are developing the engineers not only in one function, for example, R&D, but they are moving the engineers from R&D to maybe manufacturing, maybe to business development. As a consequence, 3M strives in new technology. So the ideal case would be, yes, in the global competition, we need to pursue financial results. But at the same time, if we can have a system that allows the people or the employees to grow, to become maybe general managers or business developers, I would say that is ideal.
Okay. I would like just to say a comment for our audience. I kindly remind you that in the following days, we will share the recording of this conference. So feel free to make any questions and you will have all your answers later published with this conference. We have a comment from Eleazar Gonzalez to Dr. Nakamura-san, and it says, thanks for your explanation. I used to work for Sony in the procurement area, and now I totally understand the management style from an academic perspective. Thank you. And now I have a question. What do you consider the main factor for people loyalty in Japanese companies?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a very interesting question. My generation, I would say we belong to what Dr. Abeguran said, which is we thought, our employment would be for a very long time. But if I look at my son and my daughter, their generations are thinking in a very different way. So loyalty, I think, would change going forward. But I think for corporation, it's a challenge. How can we develop the younger generation? And will the opportunities in the companies provide them to grow? If not, they have a chance to, seek other opportunities outside. So I think it is, corporate Japan's challenge to be able to retain the talent and kind of develop them. But let me give you one example of a company that has constantly adjusted, maybe the form as well as industry. I'd like to give an example of Fuji Electric. From this company, Fujitsu was born. Fujitsu is a computer or system integrator, a very big company listed in Tokyo Stock Exchange. But from this Fujitsu, a spin-off or a subsidiary is Fanuc. And Fanuc is a robotics company. So, loyalty in a company may not be loyalty from the mother company. The mother company would kind of invest in new fields. For example, Fuji Electric investing into computers, that became Fujitsu, and Fujitsu investing in robotics, that became Fanuc. Fanuc is the leading company in robotic manufacturing today. So in that regard, I think there will be opportunities for the younger generation as well.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another question. How has the traditional Japanese negotiation model of the 80s and 90s changed in order to adequate to globalization in year 2016?
Thank you. That's another interesting question. I talked about digitalization in the electronic industry. When there were integration between parts, a long-term relationship with suppliers meant a lot. But if the MPU microprocessor would control the parts, there is no need for a supplier kind of long-term relationship. So we are moving more and more towards market-based procurement. However, that is very good in terms of cost. But if we think long-term competitive, competitiveness, it's good if we can do R&D together with our suppliers. So companies who are seeking long-term still have a long-term relationship with its suppliers. Industries where cost matters are moving more into procurement that is, cost or cost base. So I would say market base. So companies like Sony, Panasonic, that is in a very competitive industry, they may move more towards procurement from a market, whereas R&D for long-term matters, companies like Toyota or I would say Mitsubishi Motors, they are more in a long-term relationship with suppliers. So I would say the relationship of will depend on the industry. I hope that I've been able to answer you.
Yes. Another one. We have a lot of questions. What is the difference in the Japanese and the Mexican systems? It's a difficult one.
I'm sorry to say I might not have enough knowledge about Mexico, but some of the cases that we study about Mexico is about CEMEX. And I'm not sure if we can say, this is a typical Mexican company, but what CEMEX is doing is very impressive. They are trying to change the game of cement in moving from B2B to B2C. They're using a lot of IT in terms of what they're trying to do. And looking at CEMEX, I think they are very good in accepting cultural diversity. So that's the kind of view I have, but I'm very sorry, I may not have enough knowledge to answer your question about Mexican management system. But right now there are many companies going into Mexico from Japan, and that's because of the NAFTA and your relationship, your location, looking at Latin America. So I hope we will see more collaboration between Mexico and Japan going forward. Thank you.
That was a question just to tell to our audience that later on in this, maybe November or sometime, we will have another a reciprocal conference in which we will tell the Mexican culture to the Japanese. So just stay tuned with us. We have another question. What are the key factors of Japanese education that contribute better to the industry growth?
I see. Okay. Let me answer this question in two folds. First, I will try to answer your question from our generations of education. And in our generation, I think emphasis in mathematics and science definitely helped in manufacturing. Also, we did a lot of, physical education, like club activity, playing baseball or playing football. And that, I think, kind of led to a very disciplined workforce. Now, going forward, this is the type of education that we are doing at Globis. Yes, we teach management knowledge, which is, a necessity in the global competition. But at the same time, we ask our students what you like to do for your life. Meaning that we are asking for a sense of mission, a purpose in life. The future world would be more led by innovation and by entrepreneurship. So we believe that for the next generation of education, we need to ask what is the internal drive, inside the student. And also, like today's, teleconference is done because of technology. In the past, I would have been requested to fly to Monterrey in order to hold the session, but actually I'm connecting from Nagoya. And so technology, I think, is another aspect. And I believe that students in Technological de Monterrey, you are very fortunate to be taught both in the campus and through online. So this type of technology education, I think, is necessary going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We are keeping on questions. It's very interesting, your conference. How are Japanese companies facing the competition of other growing Asia companies? Does it imply that they will need to change their values or organization in the future?
Yes. Asian companies are getting very strong. Korean companies, Taiwanese companies, Chinese companies, Indian companies, and Japanese companies, I think we need to change the way we compete. We will able to capture market share from US markets and European markets with good quality products, but very affordable price. That affordable price is being taken over by Asian competitors. So what we are trying to do right now is, what is a very unique value that Japanese products can provide? So, it might not be for the entire mass market, but for a unique users or for a typical market segment, we still have customers who are willing to pay more for a better quality or better service. I think we need to shift to, selective segment. Another thing is, with the investment in R&D, we need to move and create new demand. The demand might not be, a one-time product like a TV or, or automotive, but I'm looking at, products or service that is a combination of maybe 2 or 3 products combined. For example, if we can have a home that is, that uses artificial intelligence to put the air conditioner at the right level, maybe electricity at the right level, store the energy in the battery using solar power and so on. So it's a combination, I would say, of 2 or 3 products combined that reduces overall energy usage. So those are the typical type of service or products that I believe that Japanese company have to go in.
Thanks. There's another question. How do Japanese industry see Latin American market? Is it attractive to Japanese industry?
Yes, we believe that Latin America is a very important market, and first of all, it is a growing market, and the age population is much younger compared to Japan or Europe. So we see a big opportunity in Latin America. However, there is distance in terms of physical mileage between Japan and Latin America. So hopefully, Mexico can act as maybe a first base. I think a lot of automotive companies are now creating their new factories in Mexico. And because automotive industry needs a lot of suppliers are also going into Mexico. I hope, that leads to more industry going into Mexico and Latin America. And we talked about, the family-like community. I think from my experience with Mexican friends, with my friends from Spain or Portugal, the closeness between families or the community is very similar. So yeah, I look forward for further economic collaboration between Mexico, Latin America, and Japan.
Thank you. I have another question. What are Japanese companies' new values in terms of social commitment?
I see. Japanese companies have long been, first of all, there are many companies from Japan that are very long-lived. There are many companies older than 100 years. There are companies older than 300 years. Let me give you one example. Okaya Steel Company. This is a 300-year-old company. They have always developed with the community. So a CSR activity for scholarship for students who have difficulty going to university, cleaning up the street where they operate, being a sponsor for a festival. These things have long been a tradition in Japan. I think the new movement is creating social value that Professor Michael Porter has been introducing. And there are companies, for example, helping young mothers, go back to the workforce after giving birth to their children. These are typically companies, for example, Shiseido. This is a cosmetic company, and they are, helping these young mothers go back to work. So not only, a corporate giving, but creating, solving social problems that would also help the company. Those are some new movements that we are seeing in the social community kind of sphere.
Interesting. We have two more questions. One, could you give us some quickly recommendation about lean management?
I see. Yes. Lean management is about, how can we run a very efficient factory? And I think Toyota's Kanban system is most, known. But you only make what is requested from the consumer. This is ideal. So if a blue Corolla is in demand, a Kanban will act Kanban is a record system that asks for parts. A Kanban will be asked to the suppliers to create this blue color. So if you can run your factory this way, there's less inventory, so less cash flow needed, less space for all the machines. So ideally, lean management, I would say, would be very efficient as well as very good for learning. I mentioned in Toyota that there are a lot of learning by doing. So combined with planning and the tacit knowledge that you gain from this pull system, I think would will benefit the industries where a typical lead time is long and there's a lot of inventory. So those are the industries that I would say should move into lean type of production.
Our last but not least, as we always say, how is Japanese industry dealing with millennial generation, with their characteristics of fast-moving, continuous changes?
Thank you. That's a very tough question because many companies are trying to find the right business or service for them. One thing I notice is they are more, how to say, eco-friendly in a way. So they like used products, they like the share economy, and they rather be connected not by owning something, but doing something together with their friends or families. So, for example, you might be aware of Nintendo. This is a game company. And more and more games are moving into mobile games. But it's not only for personal use. You can, play the game together with your friends. So yes, it is, handy and how to say, convenient. But at the same time, if you want to socialize, you can socialize through the mobile games. These are the new service that are new service that is growing. And I understand in Mexico, football is the most popular sports. In Japan, baseball is the most popular sports. And a lot of baseball franchise owners have been moved to new type of industries called Rakuten, DNA, and so on. So I think these millennium type of services would be, a new growing field. And I think they would also globalize in the future.
Thank you very much, Professor Nakamura-san, for your interesting talk. We still have some questions, but we are running out of time. And I would like now to invite Mr. Jake Bradley, also from Globis University, to provide us some information about this excellent university with whom Tecnológico de Monterrey is getting partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me okay?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Jake. I actually work at Globis University here in Tokyo. So I'd just like to introduce our school. I think maybe some of you are quite new to us, so let me give a brief background to where we come from and about our programs as well. So next slide, please. Okay, so Globis is quite a new school. We are younger than Tecnológico de Monterrey, established in 1992. We are officially a university in Tokyo. We have been granted university status since 2006, and we offer MBA programs that are accredited by the Japanese Ministry of Education. We have MBA programs not only in Japanese, but also entirely in English since 2009. And we've just started conducting online MBA programs as well from last year. So we're trying our best to move into online and follow the example of Tecnológico de Monterrey. Next slide, please. Globis is very well known in Japan. We are the largest business school in the country. This year alone, we welcomed more than 790 students to our MBA programs in English and in Japanese. And we have campuses all across the country in East Japan, West Japan, of course, here in Tokyo as well. So next slide, please. And these are the programs that we offer in English. We have MBA programs on a full-time basis. So we have students coming from all over the world to study with us on campus here in Tokyo for 1 year. We also have a part-time program, which is very flexible for people who want to study online or on campus as well. Actually, I myself am enrolled in the part-time program, so working here full-time and studying part-time, doing my MBA. We also have a pre-MBA program as well, so it's possible to take MBA classes before becoming an MBA student, and it's possible to do that online as well as on campus. So next slide, please. And the things that Globis focuses on through our MBA programs, we have a very strong entrepreneurial spirit. So we started from scratch, just a very small school many years ago, or 24 years ago. And we grew into a very big business school. So we have that strong focus on entrepreneurship. We also have ties to venture capital ourselves through Globis Capital Partners. And we have a strong focus on personal mission as well. So Nakamura-san mentioned in his presentation that students in our MBA programs don't just learn about business, but also need to develop their, what we call in Japanese, kokorozashi, or personal mission in English. And also, as well as that, we have a very strong focus on practicality through our education, as Nakamura-san touched on in his presentation. So next slide, please. Beyond the MBA programs, we also do corporate training. We work with some of the largest companies in Japan. Actually, right now, Nakamura-san is in Nagoya, working with one of our corporate clients there, Toyota. So working together with many big businesses here in Japan. Next slide, please. And we have Globis Capital Partners as well. I mentioned before we have ties to venture capital, investing in many startups, exciting startups here in Japan, and helping these companies to grow and become successful. We've helped many companies through to their IPO and beyond. So not only doing the MBAs, we're also working with some of Japan's biggest companies and investing in some of Japan's brightest young startups. So next slide, please. So all of this is part of the Globis mission, which is to develop visionary leaders who create and innovate societies. Next slide, please. And some exciting news, if you're interested in getting to know more about Globis, we'll actually be visiting Mexico at the beginning of next month. We have a seminar in Mexico City on the 1st of October, together with one of our graduates, and then in Monterrey with one of our other Mexican graduates on the 3rd of October. If you're interested in joining these, then please do find out the information. You can just search for Globis Mexico City or Globis Monterrey on Google, and you should be able to find information about these seminars. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's all from me. A very brief introduction to our school, but if you're interested in learning more, then please do meet us in Mexico, or you can get in touch with us via email as well. Just find us at globis.ac.jp. But thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed today's session with Dean Nakamura, and now I'd like to hand back to the main presenter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's quite interesting, and we are very proud to have agreements with you. I thank you, Mr. Pratley, for the information, and Dr. Nakamura-san for his great conference. We still left some questions, but unfortunately our time is up. But before we say goodbye, let me thank you again on behalf of Tecnológico de Monterrey for this very interesting conference, which has increased our knowledge and vision of Japanese management. I would also like to thank our audience, and we hope you enjoyed this conference. Remember that in a few days we will be sharing the recording of this conference. We look forward to your participation in future events. And for our students at Tecnológico de Monterrey, I would like to invite you to participate in our academic field trips in 2017, in which we are visiting, in the Tokyo field trip, we are visiting Global University, and you may ask for more information on the email appearing on your screen. See you next time, and have a nice evening here in Mexico and Latin America, and an excellent day in Japan. Thank you very much, Mr. Pratley and Dr. Nakamura-san, for your participation in this conference. It's a great honor for us.